Alright guys, we're going to be talking about the second phase of the French Revolution. We know as the radical phase. A lot of the things that you guys learn in world history will be covered, and so I'm going to kind of blast through those parts and just emphasize the things that you need to know. Um, we're looking at 1792 to 1799, and now we are in the time period of the Age of Rousseau, because we're going to see that um, popular sovereignty is the theme of the Republic, and so the two main governing bodies we have is the National Convention and the Directory. The National Convention, established in 1792, comes where France proclaims itself as a republic now, and this is where they're installing republicanism. They get rid of the monarchy, and they basically are going to get rid of the king. The majority of the members were Jacobins and held to the value of holding a republic, and largely were well-educated middle-class people. And so within the National Convention and every other political body that we've been talking about in the French Revolution, there are different types of political factions. Within the Jacobin factions, we have kind of a new group that are called the Mountain, which are the extremely radical ones, and they represent a lot of the urban class. And you guys know, like Maximilien Robespierre is going to come through the Mountains, and also Georges Danton. And the reason why they call that is because they sat in the very upper, highest left side of the assembly hall. And then you have the Girondins, who led France into the war, the first coalition, but actually they're going to be moderate compared to the Mountains. Okay. The sans-culottes, we talked about how they were the ones, wearing trousers, not wearing the knee breeches, and they were the petite bourgeoisie, meaning the working class. They are going to be very influential in the National Convention. They are actually very radical in their ideas. They want to see the changes, and that's why they continue just to push for a lot of radical reforms. And they were outside of the National Convention, right? But they work closely with those leaders within the National Convention, and they are also in charge of a lot of the violence to keep that revolution moving forward. And there's going to be revolts and uprisings that are going to happen. They were a part of the storming of the Bastille, the March to Versailles, and the September massacres. And so they did not want to hold to anything that is moderate. They wanted to make sure that they would see the changes in their lifetime. And so, of course, with the Age of Rousseau, we talked about popular sovereignty, and so the sans-culottes are going to favor direct democracy and having everyone participate. Okay. All right, so here comes the execution of Louis XVI in January 21st, I believe, of 1793. The king is accused of treason. He is conspiring with Austria in the war, and so he's trying to stop the revolution, and that's true. That's true. He was trying to take back his country and stuff. So they found him guilty, and so they started to vote. Of the 761 or 721, okay, 361 voted for to kill him. So basically, by majority vote plus one, he was sentenced to death. And so now they basically have officially gotten rid of the king, and those that were supporting the king are obviously very upset with that. Okay, so what happens is that there's going to be tension between those of the Mountains and those of the Girondins. The Mountains believe that the Girondins are going to ally with conservatives because they're very moderate, and they actually want to have, the royalists come back and supporting maybe a constitutional monarchy. And so you have the Enrages, which are the radical working class leaders of Paris. They live in Paris, and they begin to arrest these Girondist members and the National Convention. And so now they're trying to kick out all of the non-mountain people and upholding basically a mountain, Jacobin, strong National Convention with the sans-culottes supporting them. Okay, what ends up happening is many Girondists are now in fear of their lives. They're going to flee, and they would actually try to work against the revolution. And if we talk about Jean-Paul Marat, he's going to be the one that is assassinated as an example. Okay, so here you have a sans-culottes woman. Here is the execution of the king. This is his family before they're going to take him away. And here he is beheaded by the guillotine in front of 80,000 people in the town square, and everyone can see and witness this act. All right, so in the time of the National Convention in charge, what is going on outside of France in the war that they're participating in? So the French army is actually successful in stopping Prussia in the Battle of Valmy. So this gives them, like a good morale boost. And it shows that, the National Convention feels like they are on top of things. And then you have the second battle, Battle of Jemappes, which is the victory that France upholds over the Austrian Netherlands, and so they are able to obtain that territory too. So Belgium, that area is theirs, and in February 1793, the National Convention declares war on Britain, Holland, Spain, and so now there's this very, very large coalition because of those three countries. Then you have Austria and Prussia, who they're already fighting with. Okay, but of course, we also know with the partition of Poland of 1793, this is what's going to cause the Eastern European to not trust each other, and they're going to be working out the whole Poland issue, and so it's going to actually save France. All right, so the Committee of Public Safety, you guys have heard about them. They are the ones who basically are created as an emergency government to control the internal challenges of any uprisings to the revolution. Robespierre is going to be leading it, and he was heavily influenced by Rousseau, and really was radical in trying to bring forth a true revolution. And one thing that we know he wants is a republic of virtue, which is a new type of political culture. He wanted to have a completely pure, virtuous French society that is upholding all of these ideals of moral uprightness and equality of the people, when really he's kind of in charge. But he's basically trying to purge France of those who are counter-revolutionary. So the Committee of Public Safety will work very closely with the radicals of the sans-culottes, and so the first thing that they also do is that they help the sans-culottes in their needs, because they are poor, because of all the other governing bodies before them were not for the lower social status classes. Now they're instituting a new reform. So you have the law of maximum, which is a planned economy, which means the government is controlling the prices, and they are responding to the food shortages of bread and all the economic problems and the whole debt and everything. And so there's going to be a fixed price, there's going to be a fixed amount of assignat that's going to be printed out, and so things are going to be afforded for the poor now, and there's going to be a system of rationing, and so there's a lot of different types of economic changes. Also, the government is going to kind of like control the economy through instituting new workshops and controlling new types of jobs that are being subsidized by the government. Okay. They will also create a constitution in 1793. Its key values are basically universal male suffrage. All men are going to be able to vote, abolishing slavery, and instituting basically more rights for individuals, taking from the ideas of the Declaration of rights of man and citizen, except in 1793 they're not going to actually institute it. They just wrote it and they want to follow it, but it doesn't actually follow through. But in 1795, that's when it's actually going to be utilized. The French colonies, the West Indies, once controlled by France, is going to go through its own revolution, and they are going to first abolish slavery, and then eventually it'll lead to their independence. Because of all of the government control, we can say that this is essentially an early version of socialism. A lot of the policies were just to respond to the demands of the sans-culottes, where all of the government regulation and control was also like given different types of social services provided for people. They had a universal education for elementary school kids, and so different parts of towns and society is being reformed. Okay, so how is the Committee of Public Safety doing? And once they are in power in 1793, well, they are going to enable France to go and focus on a total war policy in terms of fighting its enemies, and so they institute the levée en masse, which is a conscription. It's a force military draft, and so if you are from the age of 18 to 40, it means that you are fair game to be a soldier. And so what happens is that the army size of France grows up to 800,000 men, and so this is the biggest ever in European war history, and it's a huge army, right? And it's going to lead to the success of the French military for some time up to Napoleon. And so by 1794 of July, the Austrian Netherlands and the Rhineland is now going to be controlled by France. I'll show you a map on that. And so the first coalition that was band together, there's a lot of countries, just France, they're falling apart. And so because of that planned economy, that socialist type of system, it made basically their total war policy very effective, where they are producing a lot of arms and ammunitions, and they're focused on, fighting and spreading the revolution through these wars. Okay, they gain, of course, a lot more nationalism. Sorry, I'm one bullet point behind. They gain more nationalism through their victories, and so they are bringing unity to the French people, and thus begins, under the Committee of Public Safety, is the Reign of Terror. So how do they control what's going on inside? Is that we have the beginning is the assassination of Jean-Paul Marat, and it was by a Girondist, and because she killed him, it led to the Committee of Public Safety to pass the Law of Suspects, which basically any alleged enemies of the revolution, any enemies should be brought before the court of the Committee of Public Safety, and they were basically going to hear any cases of treason, and from that point they can just kill them and send them to the guillotine. This is where they're trying to address those that are counter-revolutionary. The Committee of Public Safety is going to sniff them out, and one of the examples is going to be Louis XVI, and his wife is going to be killed, right? And so within the same year they both die. The guillotine is supposed to be this humane execution system because it doesn't, cause like much torture. It's just a swift killing, but because it's kind of like this whole spectacle, many people are always in the town, just watching all these things happen. And we're having a total of 40,000 people that are being executed in this 1 year of the Committee of Public Safety that is reigning. And so it's called the Reign of Terror because terror is a weapon by the Committee of Public Safety that is used in order to control society. It wasn't focused on one social class or another. It was pretty much whoever showed any possibility of betraying the French Republic. So you have 8% of the people who were killed were nobles, 14% were of the bourgeoisie. 6% of the clergy, and 70% were of the peasants and working classes. And so even though the sans-culottes are working with the Committee of Public Safety, the peasant population is still pretty much a huge portion of it. And so most of these deaths occurred in places that had revolts against the National Convention. And so in Western France, there's this one region called the Vendée, and this is where you have 300,000 people are going to be sent to prison, and many of them will be killed. Oh, sorry, I missed out on these. So what ends up happening is that trying to sniff out any types of opposition, and then you have the Girondists who are actually going to be targeted and executed because of one, they're trying to get rid of all the Girondists out of the National Convention, and two, Charlotte Corday was the one who assassinated Marat, and she was a Girondist. Okay, so here's a picture of the guillotine, how it works. As you can tell, you want to have a slanted edge, because if it comes straight down, then it might not cut it, cleanly, right? The neck cleanly. So then, if you have it at an angle, it's able to slice through. This is the western part. I was talking about the western region, the Vendée. That's where a lot of the uprisings were to take place, and through these areas of resistance, that's where we're going to see that people are going to be killed. Okay, all right. So what types of changes in society through the Committee of Public Safety? Well, they begin to de-Christianize the country, and so they institute a new calendar: no Sundays, no religious holidays, no Christmas, no Easter. The months are going to change names, and so by doing this, you have basically a new national identity, and your country is organized in a different way, and your years are different, right? You start counting from 1793 of when the 1792 when the French Republic is found, and months are held to 30 days. Weeks are no longer 7 days, but there's 10-day blocks, and so everything is going to be changed because they don't want to have the old regime's culture continue into the new republic. Robespierre is going to introduce the cult of the supreme being. Basically, instead of getting rid of religion entirely, this is going to be a deist religion. Okay, so it's believing in deism, where you would recognize that God exists, but you don't follow per se the Christian God. And so the Cathedral of Notre Dame is now renamed as the Temple of Reason, and so those that were very religious are obviously going to be very against the National Convention and the Committee of Public Safety's institutions of these laws. All right, so how will this all end? Well, because of the fear and insecurity created by the Reign of Terror and the Committee of Public Safety, Robespierre was going to be denounced, and he will be arrested, and he will be executed by guillotine. And many of the people in the National Convention just couldn't trust him anymore, right? It says, like, are we the next ones? If so, I don't want to die, and so we're going to actually have to change things. And many of the radicals of the working class didn't really want to support him after seeing all of these other people that were killed, and he kind of turned on them. What ends up happening is that you have the Thermidorian reaction. It's called that because of the month of July. You guys read about that. And this is going to be the end of the Reign of Terror. What's going to happen is politically there's going to be a swing from radicalism back to conservatism. So we talked about the liberal conservative side and how it often swings back and forth. This is that example. It's going to swing back, and you're going to have the end of the Jacobins. And who's going to come to power is basically the Girondins are going to be readmitted to the National Convention, and the bourgeoisie, who once were a part of the National Assembly in 1789, are going to be introduced into the new government. Okay, so the new government is called the Directory. It's going to rule for only 4 years because it's not very strong. It's going to be overthrown by Napoleon, and so the new constitution was written in 1795, and they instituted it, and they basically set up a Republican form of government, but it actually has different branches. Okay, so in the executive branch, you have 5 executives, and they are called the directors. That's why it's called the directory. And then you have in the other branch, you have the bicameral legislature, which is the Council of 500, which is one of them, and then you have the Council of Ancients. And the thing is that through the Constitution of 1795, all males are given the right to vote. The problem is that what are they voting for? They're not voting for actual specific laws. They're not voting for one certain leader, but they just vote for the electors. So certain electors are going to be part of the different councils, and basically what ends up happening is that the middle class is going to be in control of the government. And the weakness of the directory and why it's going to fall, it comes down for several reasons. Okay, so let me list it out for you. Why does the directory fail? Well, one, the support that they get comes from a very, very narrow social class base. And so it's basically the upper middle class that is in support of them. You don't really have the mass of the working class anymore. Through the directory, no more sans-culottes. That was just before in the National Convention. And so another reason is that they're actually very politically corrupt. They're going to try to rig and suppress and kind of like cancel out these elections. Also, they won't deal with the economic crisis very well, because they are going to remove all those government regulations that the National Convention, the Committee of Public Safety, put in, and that's going to basically ruin the economy and make things worse again. And they were way too dependent upon their military. So what ends up happening is that there are going to be rebellions that are going to happen through the directory. And so the directory had a strong military through a lot of its generals, Napoleon being one of them. And so you have the ability to suppress any types of oppositions, which also makes them very corrupt because they're like a dictatorship. And when they have elections, like I said, basically they were annulled because they didn't like who was elected. And so they didn't want certain types of royalists that were, supporting possibly a constitutional monarchy. And so they want to get rid of them. And the government was becoming more bankrupt because the prices were going up. And so the country was just falling apart. Because it had a strong military, France had a strong military under the directory, this allowed them to stay in power for those 4 years. And so they were successful in defeating the First Coalition. They would beat France. France would beat the English in Egypt, and Napoleon is going to come back, right? And he's going to be part of this coup d'état. And the leader of this whole conspiracy of the overthrow is through Abbassius, and they are going to bring Napoleon's forces in, and the coup d'état Brumaire is going to happen in November of 1799, and this is going to institute Napoleon's era. Okay, all right, so that's pretty much it. Here's a map of the lands that were gained throughout this time under the Republic from 1792 to 1799.